Well, good morning and welcome to BBRC Britain and English on VJ Day, Victory over Japan. Well, thank you very much for joining me here today. There'll be several commemorations later this morning, certainly in our local town here. There will be an act of remembrance in other places as well around the country, remembering all those lost in World War II up to the Japanese declaration signalling the end of World War II. Well, I'd like to just this morning, somehow, in any way, recreate some of the perhaps thoughts and perhaps some of the events in the mind, although I could never recreate the raw images suffered at the hands of the soldiers and civilians in the war. But I will try to endeavour to give you a few key dates and also a few of the events leading up to the declaration. Well, just a bit of background here. In my relative ignorance, in my defence, my grandfather died of cancer in 1990. Now, that generation, just like the Queen, the late Queen, they never talked about the war. They didn't really talk about the past and anything bad. They remained quite defiant during adversity, and they didn't really want to dwell on the past. They didn't want to put it onto the younger generations. So therefore, I never really found very much out. But certainly my grandmother, after my grandfather's death, did say that a lot of people died when they came back from the campaign, and certainly I will endeavour to go through a few things. As I say, I can't recreate the raw images, although later in the broadcast I will try to put up to a few photographs up from some of the International War, the Imperial War Museum, I should say, displays there on the website, and also I've also consulted other websites. But on my wall, might be quite of interest to you, certainly quite encouraging, especially during times of trouble and conflict. Keep calm and carry on. That's Kitchener. I'm trying to keep the spirits up during the war. Well, the worst, probably one of the worst conflicts at the hands of the Japanese was the Burma Railway. Here's a few key dates and some of the background. And I would say it's quite important for young people to realise the history, certainly with their own, perhaps family members gone by, grandparents suffered at the hands of war, and certainly a lot of people talk about their country's history. We seem to have to be embarrassed, which is very wrong. And I've got mine out here, the national flag of Great Britain and Northern Ireland here, the Union Jack, sometimes known as the Union flag. And there we are. Hold it up with pride. And don't forget it. Every other country will if we don't. And certainly, why shouldn't we? We have a lot of people here, but they should value this country and value this flag, and we should be quite proud to put it up sometimes, and shouldn't be embarrassed. Every other country has their flags up, certainly sometimes in the windows. Are we embarrassed? No. Anyway, going back to some of the key dates here in the Second World War, and I quote a few with the marvels of the internet and AI, a few of the details here. The surrender of Japan at the end of World War II signalled the end of the war, after the Americans bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima, but not forgetting in 1941 the Japanese did bomb Pearl Harbor in America. They dropped, the Americans that is, dropped atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it was the first use of atomic bombs. And the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and the Japanese government's communications. Then signalled their intent to surrender. And that was formally signed on the 2nd of September 1945. But the 15th of August was when it actually officially happened, certainly through the communications with the Americans and the Japanese and the Americans, and VJ Day is known as the 15th of August. Today is VJ Day. VJ Day, and not forgetting VE Day, VJ Day today. Victory over Japan as opposed to victory in Europe. Get those right. I try not to confuse them. And by the way, I've been commemorating this for over, well, say 30 years now, because I remember doing it in 1995. One of the Japanese main role during World War II was to remove the United States as a Pacific power in order to gain territory in East Asia and the Southwest Pacific Islands. They wanted power, they didn't want the Americans to have it. Incidentally, if we look a bit further forward now, the Americans are still quite powerful in the world, but it's not the British. It's probably going to be more the Chinese now. And to a lesser extent, probably the Indians. Germany and Japan had a fraught relationship, as Japan showed little interest in prioritising sending raw materials to Germany in the 1939-40 period. Most contentious being German requests for soybeans from Makura. We know that Hitler initially did not think Japan would be needed to secure a victory over the Soviet Union. And I just quote a few bits and pieces here from the internet. And here are some of the key dates, as I quote here. August 6, 1945, the United States dropped an atom bomb on Hiroshima. As I've stated, August the 8th, 1945, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, violating a neutrality pact. Nothing new there then. 9th of August, 1945, the United States dropped a second atomic bomb in other words, on Nagasaki. 10th of August, 1945, the Japanese government communicated its intention to surrender under the terms of the Potsdam Declaration. August 15th, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's acceptance of the surrender terms, mercifully. 2nd of September 1945, the formal signing of the Japanese surrender took place. The documents of surrender on the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. So there was a ship there. So some of the key dates there. And here's a bit of information here from the Imperial War Museum. Well worth a visit in London. But Japan's war role in the war, Second World War here. And in December 1941, Japan was already at war with China. There's been a fraught relationship with the Chinese and the Japanese over the years. Well, already at war with China, attacked British, Dutch and American territories in Asia and the Pacific. By June 1942, Japanese conquest encompassed a vast area of Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific. Under Japanese occupation, prisoners of war and enslaved civilians were forced to work for the captors in harsh and often inhumane conditions. And that was never more evident than in the building of the Burma Railway. The Burma Railway, which took so many lives with all sorts of inhumane conditions during the time, in oppressive heat, and certainly terrible conditions. Not known, wouldn't have a clue what it was like today, although certainly we've had heat waves, but nothing like what they would have had in Burma, Thailand. Well, the railway also known as Death Railway. Japan, being already at war with China in 1941, attacked British, Dutch and American territories in Asia and the Pacific. By June 1942, Japanese conquest encompassed a vast area of Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific. Under Japanese occupation, prisoners of war and enslaved civilians were forced to work for their captors in harsh and often inhumane conditions. A series of land battles were fought in China, Burma and New Guinea. Although Japan achieved early successes, its resources were overstretched. In contrast, America was able to mobilize huge economic resources to intensify its efforts, beginning with amphibious landings in the Pacific, Tokyo and other Japanese cities. They suffered unprecedented destruction by conventional comparisons. And finally, the atomic bombs were used to try to end the war. After, of course, it did end here in May 1945. And the railway was built, in 1943, with significant losses. Mainly a lot of it was to do with the terrible conditions and the amount of cuttings they had to do, and through a jungle to build the railway in a deep ravine. They had a lot of mosquitoes, terrible conditions, heat waves, malnutrition. They were exhausted, and that's what killed them. And a lot of them actually died those who did come home died when they came home. As my grandmother once told me, a lot of them didn't live very long, even if they did come home. Well, I could never recreate those images in your minds. We can only but consider what we see, and perhaps sometimes if we go to a place like the Imperial War Museum, we can see some of the images perhaps of the day, which obviously would be in black and white and very different to what we'd have these days, because there wouldn't be many photographs taken at the times, of course, anyway, if at all. So we can only really imagine. Well, as I say, there was a lot of fatigue. The Burma Railway didn't have very much morale due to all the losses, the insurgent by the Japanese, and certainly malnutrition was a massive factor. They weren't fed very much. They weren't given meals as they should have been done, and when they had exhaustion and the terrible heat, and many of them didn't survive very long. Many thousands of British and Allied forces soldiers died of the tropical climate and the effects. Many casualties. And many died, as I say, after the war. It's well worth reflecting on all this for our freedom, of course. Before I continue, may I say there's a lot of information online to consult. By the way, the railway is on the screen there. 257 miles in such sweltering heat. And just to say there were a lot of losses from Burmese people, Thai soldiers, let's say Burmese soldiers, Thai soldiers and Malaysian as well. And do have a look. I know it's easier to say you will and you don't. We don't really want to look at bad news, but just remember what happened and the sacrifice. Signing of that declaration. But mercifully, most had faith. There are fierce battles, some of the language used here. As I say, the Imperial War Museum bears details, and certainly the Japanese suffered heavy losses with the dropping of those atom bombs by the Americans. and this is a little bit about the Pearl Harbor. Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941 was primarily aimed at crippling the US Pacific Fleet and preventing it from interfering with Japan's planned military expansion in Southeast Asia. The attack was intended to be a preemptive strike, allowing Japan to secure resources and establish dominance in the region without immediate US intervention. Anyone who doesn't know much about the war may like to know that the war actually started when Germany invaded Poland in 1939. There were 1st of September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Concluded on the 2nd of September 1945 with Japan's surrender. There were 6 long years. And a few battles here in the timeline, just to give you. Battle of the Atlantic, 3rd of September 1939 to 8th of May 1945. Battle of Dunkirk, 26th of May to the 4th of June 1940. Battle of Britain, July the 10th to October the 31st, 1940. Battle of Crete, 20th of May to the 1st of June 1941. Siege of Leningrad, September the 8th, 1941 to January the 27th, 1944. Now, there is a wealth and breadth of information here. Well, this is just a few dates leading up to VJ Day, well, of course, as you may realise, we've had VE Day this year. Last year we had D-Day. 1944, July the 6th, D-Day, the Allied invasion of Normandy begins the liberation of Western Europe. A bit of a recap there. December the 16th, the Battle of the Bulge, Germany's last major offensive in the West begins. That's 1944 again. 1945, this is from 1945. January the 9th, the Luzon campaign in the Philippines begins. February the 8th, the Rhineland campaign in Germany begins. 19th of February, the Battle of Battle of Lo Jima begins. L-W-O-J-I-M-A. 9th of March, US AAF conducts a large air raid on Tokyo. This is 1945 still. And 1st of April, the Battle of Okinawa begins. 29th of April, the US 7th Army liberates Statue. And Adolf Hitler commits suicide on the 30th of April 1945. Well, as you can tell, there's a breadth of information there. A lot of information there. I researched some of it up there. As I say, Imperial War Museum, I quote information there about Burma, Thailand, Malaysia. And it is shocking the amount of people who died in the war, which I will quote some figures. Certain civilians, many thousands of civilians, and of course servicemen. And in some areas, as my grandmother used to say, more civilians than there were servicemen killed because the bombs being dropped and whole communities totally destroyed. What the Allies can do in the face of adversity. But today, we commemorate this momentous event in our history, 15th of August 1945. May they rest in peace and rise in glory. We do know that most of them are not here today. They are no longer with us. Being 80 years ago, certainly there may be the odd few in a hope, but certainly not that many around now. I do remember in 2009 when the last Tommy of the First World War died. There were 3 died within a few weeks of each other. And, Henry Ellingham, Bill Stone and Harry Patch, those were the last 3 who fought in the First World War. Died in 2009, all 3 of them. There may be a few left, some of them probably lost some of their independence, but probably will talk about, if they can, their experiences, and they're with us in spirit. Well, certainly those that are unable to talk about it, hopefully they've left some lasting memories for us and their families to keep their memories alive, because certainly I didn't hear anything from my grandfather because he didn't want to talk about it probably, and I was very young. It's not the sort of thing you talk about with children anyway. Well, anyway, all that, I'll leave that for your contemplation and reflection. There's a wealth of material, as I say, online, and we do think about those suffered and lost today. Totally changed the course of history, and certainly communities here were devastated in the war. And some places, and people may say, well, some communities never got over the war or the poverty, and rebuilding was never really the same. Communities were lost, people were lost, and there was never enough money to recreate communities, and the concrete that came up in the 50s and 60s, what was built, was never really very adequate. Perhaps a lot of it had to be replaced, and some has never been completed properly. And there's plenty of cities and towns like that around this country. Well, anyway, I think we remember those people today lost, and as I say, there may be some people alive still able to talk about these things, but many of them will have gone before us. Thank you very much for joining me here today. This has been BBRC, Britain and English, and do consult some of those websites. God bless you. Thank you now. And I will endeavour to put some photographs now and some scenes from some of the archives. Thank you now. Bye-bye.